So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're out in the yard, you're doing some weekend gardening, and you just scrape your knee on, like, a rusty trellis or something.
Right, something totally mundane.
Exactly. Mundane, it gets a little red, it's maybe a little warm. You wash it out, you slap a bandage on it, and you honestly just think nothing of it.
Yeah, as you do.
But then, a week later, you are lying in an intensive care unit. The lights are glaring, the monitors are just screaming, and there's this exhausted doctor looking at you and your family, and they're just shaking their head.
Wow, yeah.
And they say, I'm sorry. We have thrown every single drug we have at this infection. We have no ammunition left that can stop it.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario, right? But the thing is, based on the epidemiological data sitting in our source stack today, that exact scenario isn't just a nightmare. By the year 2050, that exact situation is projected to kill up to 16 million people every single year.
16 million.
Every year. Modern medicine is quite literally running out of ammo.
And see, that terrifying reality, it forces this really uncomfortable realization about the systems we trust. Because we want to believe that the medical establishment, the hospitals, the medical boards, this whole multi-billion-dollar apparatus, we want to believe it's this perfectly woven, self-correcting safety net.
Oh, totally. We assume it just works.
Right. We assume that if a frontline doctor spots a massive systemic flaw that threatens millions of lives, they can just, pull a red cord, the assembly line stops, and the institution says, oh, thank you, let's fix this.
Right, but the reality of institutional bureaucracy, it operates on a completely different set of biological imperatives.
How do you mean?
Well, an institution's primary drive is self-preservation. It's not necessarily truth. So when you get this brilliant, divergent thinker who points out that, hey, the foundation of the institution is actually rotting, the institution doesn't fix the foundation.
It attacks the thinker.
Exactly. It views the whistleblower as a pathogen, basically. And it triggers this massive autoimmune response just to destroy them.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are unpacking this staggeringly dense 40-year timeline involving, honestly, one of the most complex figures in modern medical history.
Yeah, this source stack is wild.
It really is. I'm talking about a stack of sources that includes everything from highly confidential UK National Health Service whistleblower documents, grueling employment tribunal records, cutting-edge AI architecture blueprints, all sitting right alongside, like ancient Vedic texts and deep Jungian psychology.
It sounds like a completely chaotic mix of disciplines, I know. But as we are going to explore, you really cannot possibly untangle the global crisis of antimicrobial resistance without understanding the deeply specific, profoundly rare psychology of the man who tried to warn us about it decades ago.
We're talking about Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa, affectionately known by his patients and his peers as Dr. Shri.
Dr. Shri, yeah.
But we aren't just reading down a medical resume today. The sources actually reveal the anatomy of a highly unique, deeply misunderstood personality type. He's this visionary who possessed an extremely high IQ and this rare psychological makeup. And he endured just immense institutional suffering and systemic gaslighting to bring about a late-in-life revolution.
And we really need to set the stakes for you, the listener, right now, because this is not just a biography of a disgruntled doctor who had a rough time with hospital management.
Right, it's way bigger than that.
Oh, massively. What we have in these documents is a literal roadmap for global survival against what they call the silent tsunami of superbugs. What's fascinating here is how this deep dive reveals that one man's cosmic sense of duty and his willingness to just be utterly broken by the system he served might literally be the key to saving modern medicine from total collapse.
So I want to start by looking at the architecture of his mind. Because to understand why Dr. Srivatsa was perceived as such a massive threat by the establishment, you really have to understand the specific type of human being we're dealing with here.
Yeah, his psychological profile is key to all of this.
Let's look at the foundation first. He graduates from Bangalore Medical College, moves to the UK in 1983, and then he dedicates over 30 years of his life as a pediatric intensive care specialist and a general practitioner.
Right.
By all accounts, he is a highly skilled, fiercely dedicated clinician. But the testimonials from his peers consistently describe him as, well, an anomaly.
They absolutely do. You look at testimonials in the sources, like the one from Dr. A.S. Arvind Rao, and they specifically highlight that Srivatsa was, quote, very different from many of us.
Different how?
Well, he wasn't just executing medical protocols, he was constantly looking at the architecture of the protocols themselves. And if we connect this to the broader literature on high IQ, visionary personalities, a very distinct, often tragic psychological profile starts to emerge.
Break that profile down mechanically for us. Why is it that someone with this specific high-level pattern recognition, why do they always seem to attract so much friction? I mean, why doesn't the institution just recognize their brilliance and put them in charge?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's because they process reality fundamentally differently than the institution does.
Go on.
A rare, high IQ visionary, they operate on a strict foundation of objective pattern recognition. They can look at a seemingly disconnected set of data points today, and they can accurately map out the catastrophic failure that will happen 30 years from now.
Like they see the Matrix, basically.
Basically, yeah. Their primary driving psychological need is the pursuit of truth. But an institution does not operate on truth.
What does it operate on?
An institution operates on consensus, on protocol, and on tribal approval.
Wait, I think I see the collision course here. The institution just wants to keep the trains running on time today, right?
Yeah.
But the visionary is pointing out that the tracks lead off a cliff 10 miles down the road.
Precisely. And to the people managing the trains today, that visionary sounds like an absolute lunatic. When you have a personality type driven by objective reality rather than, the comfort of the group, they are constantly watched by their peers.
Because they stand out.
Right. People can sense the sheer horsepower of their intellect, so they monitor them, but they rarely actually understand them. The visionary speaks a language of future consequences that the present bureaucracy just hasn't learned yet.
That has to be incredibly alienating.
Oh, it creates a profound, crushing sense of isolation. I mean, the visionary is trying to solve problems the world hasn't even noticed yet, and the world responds by labeling them difficult or disruptive or arrogant.
Which maps perfectly onto Dr. Srivatsa's experience in the NHS.
Right.
But here is where the source material takes a really fascinating hard left turn.
Yeah, the spiritual aspect.
Exactly. Because Dr. Srivatsa isn't just a secular science-minded savant who happens to be smart. He brings this incredibly heavy, ancient spiritual heritage right into the modern clinic. The documents emphasize that he belongs to the Kadiyali Upadhyaya Brahmin lineage.
Specifically the Vishwamitra Gotra and Dhananjaya Pravara.
Right. Now, for the listener who has no idea what that means, this isn't just a genealogical footnote. For over 600 years, his ancestors were Asama Vidwans, which translates to eightfold scholars.
Eightfold scholars, yeah.
They were the literal protectors of knowledge,
Yeah.
the elite scholarly advisors at the Sringar Matha, which is a major historical center of Advaita Vedanta philosophy in India.
And it is so crucial to understand that this lineage functions as the base operating system of his mind. Being an Astama Vidwan wasn't just a job title for his ancestors, it was a cosmic mandate.
A mandate to do what, exactly?
It instilled a concept of dharma, a sacred duty to protect humanity through the preservation of true knowledge and healing. It's this unbroken tradition of the priest-healer.
And the mythology attached to this is just wild to read about, especially in the context of a modern medical whistleblower. The sources point out that his family's ancestral deity is Sri Karthikeya at the Uluru Temple in Karnataka.
Yes.
In Hindu mythology, Karthikeya is the divine physician, sure, but he is also the commander of the gods and the ultimate demon slayer.
The symbolic alignment there is almost cinematic. I mean, Karthikeya protects the universe wielding a divine weapon called the Vel, destroying asuras, or demons, who threaten cosmic order. And the source documents draw this incredibly deliberate parallel to Dr. Srivatsa's modern life. Just as his ancestral deity fights mythological demons, Srivatsa felt he was born to fight the microscopic demons of antibiotic-resistant superbugs that threaten to plunge human health back into the Dark Ages.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Because this sounds incredible, but we're talking about a guy practicing evidence-based medicine in a modern UK hospital. If I'm a hospital administrator or even just a fellow doctor, and a colleague starts operating under the belief that he is fulfilling a 600-year-old mythological destiny to slay microscopic demons, I'm probably going to flag him as a massive liability.
Oh, 100%.
Like, how does feeling chosen by the universe not run the risk of making a doctor dangerously overconfident or even completely detached from scientific reality?
See, that is exactly how a rigid, secular bureaucracy would interpret, and honestly, that's a big part of why they attacked him.
Yeah.
But it requires a fundamental misunderstanding of how this spirituality actually functions psychologically for him.
How so?
The sources are very clear here. This spiritual lineage didn't replace his medical rigor. Not at all. It fueled the endurance required to perform the science when everyone else was telling him to stop.
So it wasn't about replacing the scientific method with, like, prayer or something?
Not at all. It is about a concept called lokasamgraha, which translates roughly to the maintenance, holding together, and protection of the world.
World maintenance. I like that.
Right. Think about it. When a brilliant mind identifies a fatal flaw in the medical system, like the severe overuse of antibiotics, the system's first instinct is to crush that mind through financial and social ruin.
Yeah, the autoimmune response we talked about.
Exactly. If Dr. Srivatsa were operating purely out of personal ego, purely as a secular doctor just wanting a promotion or a quiet life, he would have quit when they attacked him. The pain would have been way too great. He would have compromised just to save his career.
But because he framed his work through this ancient sacred duty, the attacks on his career didn't break his core drive.
Exactly. He viewed his role in the hospital not as a job to be preserved, but as a dharmic responsibility he inherited over 6 centuries.
Wow.
He wasn't fighting for his own glory or his own pension. He believed the universe required this action of him. It wasn't overconfidence. It was total radical submission to a higher duty. This spiritual backing functioned as literal psychological armor against institutional violence.
That reframes it entirely.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between fighting for your paycheck and fighting for your soul.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if you're fighting for your paycheck, getting fired destroys you.
Yeah.
But if you're fighting a cosmic battle, getting fired is just, a change of scenery.
That is a brilliant synthesis. And to truly grasp why he needed that armor, to understand why he became an existential threat to the medical establishment in the first place, we have to look at the monster he was trying to slay.
The superbugs.
Yes. We have to talk about the silent tsunami.
The antimicrobial resistance crisis, AMR. Let's really dig into the mechanics of this, because I think a lot of people just assume a superbug means you get a bad cough that takes, like, a few extra days to clear up. But the sources paint a picture of total systemic collapse.
Yeah, let's contextualize the timeline here. So back in the 1980s and 1990s, the medical world was essentially throwing a massive, unrestrained party for antibiotics.
They were handing them out like candy.
Exactly. They were viewed as the ultimate miracle drug. You have a sniffle, take a pill.
Yeah.
Earache, take a pill. But Dr. Srivatsa is described during this period as this caffeinated, intense maverick.
Running around the wards.
Yeah, he's scribbling feverishly on chalkboards in these neon-lit hospital wards, manually swabbing equipment himself, tracking exactly how bacteria were adapting. He was looking at the biological mechanics of how bacteria share genetic information, how they undergo horizontal gene transfer, and he was screaming from the rooftops that this miracle was mathematically guaranteed to run out.
He saw the biological adaptation happening in real time, like 35 years before it became a mainstream talking point.
He really did.
And the data we have in these sources from the 2024 Lancet and CDC reports, it proves his pattern recognition was flawlessly, terrifyingly accurate.
The projections are just apocalyptic. Like we mentioned earlier, by 2050, AMR is projected to kill between 10 to 16 million people annually.
It's hard to even fathom that number.
It is, but the death toll is actually just the final symptom. The real terror is the domino effect. Modern medicine is essentially a massive, complex house of cards, and effective antibiotics are the table that the house sits on.
And if you remove the table,
everything collapses. Every single card falls.
Break that down for us. How does the failure of antibiotics destroy procedures that have, nothing to do with an infection?
Okay, think about a routine cesarean section. You are literally cutting into the human abdomen. Right now, that's incredibly safe because we administer prophylactic antibiotics.
Just in case.
Right. But without them, the risk of lethal sepsis skyrockets, and we return childbirth mortality back to 19th century levels. Or think about cancer chemotherapy. Chemo fundamentally destroys your immune system to kill the cancer. The only reason patients survive a simple common cold during chemo is because we shield them with antibiotics.
So without them, the treatment itself kills you.
Without them, chemotherapy becomes a death sentence from secondary infection. Yeah, joint replacements, organ transplants, IVF treatments, dialysis. Every single advanced medical procedure relies entirely on our ability to control bacterial infection. If the superbugs win, modern medicine just ceases to exist.
It is a staggering realization, and it really begs the question, how did we let this happen? How did we squander the greatest discovery in human history? The sources are brutal about the economics of this failure. It wasn't an accident. We actively caused it.
We absolutely did. I mean, on the agricultural side, we fed thousands of tons of antibiotics to healthy chickens and pigs just to fatten them up faster for market, introducing massive amounts of the drug directly into the environmental food chain.
Just for profit.
Yep. But inside the hospital, the failure was driven by what Dr. Srivatsa so acutely diagnosed as doctor-centered panic and the industrialization of healthcare.
I want to talk about that dynamic because it brings the stakes right into the listener's living room. Think about the last time you, or maybe your child, had a really nasty viral throat infection. You go to the doctor, you are tired, you are scared, and you just want to fix. You pressure the doctor for a Z-Pack just so you can feel like you are doing something. We all do it.
We all do it. And that perfectly natural human fear is the exact vulnerability the system exploits. The statistics in the source material are damning.
Give us an example.
Well, over 95% of patients presenting with COVID-19 symptoms in certain data sets were inappropriately prescribed antibiotics.
95%.
Yes. And COVID is a virus. Antibiotics are literally useless against viruses. They only target bacteria. Yet 95% of those patients were handed a prescription anyway.
So, mechanically, why does a highly educated doctor write a prescription for a drug they scientifically know will not work? Like, what is the incentive there?
Because the modern clinic is not optimized for health, it is optimized for throughput and liability management. Dr. Srivatsa noted that 8 out of 10 patients visit doctors out of sheer, unadulterated fear, not actual medical necessity.
8 out of 10.
Yeah. They feel a symptom, they panic because they don't understand their body, and they demand some sort of intervention.
And for the doctor on the other side of the desk?
The doctor is given exactly 7 minutes per patient by corporate management. It takes 10 seconds to scribble a prescription for an antibiotic, which acts as a psychological placebo for the patient, makes them feel heard, and gets them out the door so the clinic can bill the insurance company.
Because the alternative takes too long.
Right. It would take 20 minutes to sit down, validate the patient's fear, and educate them on why their immune system actually just needs rest. The system penalizes the 20-minute conversation and rewards the 10-second prescription.
So it is a wealth-centered, algorithm-driven industry that actually profits from keeping patients in a state of terror and dependency. We're essentially training bacteria in real time, giving them thousands of daily reps to figure out how to defeat our drugs, all because hospital management wants higher patient turnover.
Precisely. And that exact micro-decision, multiplied by billions of clinical encounters over decades, is what feeds the superbug tsunami.
But if you are a frontline ICU doctor like Srivatsa, and you realize that the basic operational model of your hospital is contributing to a future global pandemic, pointing that out doesn't win you any awards.
Not at all.
In fact, it triggers that systemic immune response we talked about earlier, which brings us to the most harrowing, mechanically fascinating part of these sources: the systemic retaliation against Dr. Srivatsa.
The anatomy of this institutional violence is meticulously mapped out over a 14-year period in these documents. It is an absolute masterclass in bureaucratic gaslighting.
Let's walk through the timeline, because it's not just some hospital administrator being petty in the break room. It is a highly coordinated legal and psychological assassination. The catalyst seems to hit a boiling point in the year 2000 at Wrexham Park Hospital.
Correct. So Srivatsa was observing incredibly lax infection control. He saw nurses and doctors failing to adhere to basic hygiene guidelines. So he did his job.
As he should.
He insisted on strict protocols. He was physically swabbing surfaces to prove the presence of dangerous pathogens, challenging his peers to raise their standards to prevent cross-infection.
He was trying to protect the patients from the very crisis he knew was coming. And how did the hospital thank him?
They initiated a campaign of psychological invalidation. When an institution cannot discredit a whistleblower's data, they attempt to pathologize the whistleblower's mind.
Yeah, make him look crazy.
Exactly. The administration essentially tried to paint his intense focus on hygiene as a mental instability. But the documents reveal a stunning moment here. An independent psychiatrist was brought in to formally evaluate Dr. Srivatsa.
And what was this psychiatrist's conclusion?
Total vindication. The psychiatrist concluded that Dr. Srivatsa was perfectly sane, highly rational, and deeply committed.
Wow.
Furthermore, the psychiatrist explicitly stated that the clinic environment itself was highly toxic and formally advised the medical director not to force Dr. Srivatsa back into that hostile workplace.
Wait, hold on. You have an independent medical expert requested by the hospital officially stating on the record that the whistleblower is sane and the hospital environment is the problem. Mechanically, how does a hospital ignore that? Case closed, right?
In a system driven by truth, yes, case closed. But in a system driven by self-preservation, the medical director simply ignored the psychiatric report.
You're kidding.
Nope. He ordered Dr. Srivatsa to return to the clinic anyway, deliberately and maliciously forcing him back into the psychological meat grinder that they already knew was toxic.
That is just calculated cruelty.
And when the psychological pressure failed to break his resolve, the institution shifted to a much more lethal tactic: financial and professional starvation.
Hit him in the wallet.
Yeah. By December 2009, they officially suspended his salary. They cut off his ability to feed his family or pay his mortgage.
So how does he survive? The documents say he tried to work as a locum, temporary substitute doctor at other practices just to keep his head above water.
He did. He tried. But in 2010, the bureaucracy deployed what might be the most insidious weapon in the modern institutional arsenal. A highly convenient, completely unexplained IT glitch occurred in the NHS system.
A magic computer arrow, just out of nowhere.
Exactly. This glitch abruptly removed his name from the national performers list.
Explain the mechanical consequences of that. Like, what does it actually mean to be wiped off that list?
It is functional erasure. The national performers list is the absolute prerequisite to practicing medicine in the UK.
Go without it.
Without your name on that digital registry, you cannot legally touch a patient, write a prescription, or earn a single penny as a doctor anywhere in the country. The glitch didn't just fire him from a hospital, it legally deleted his identity as a physician.
They completely severed his ability to exist in society. And then reading through the employment tribunal records, there is this incredibly dense legal maneuver they pull to avoid the fallout. The Primary Care Trust utilizes something called TUPI regulations. I had to read this like 3 times to understand it.
Yeah, TUPI stands for Transfer of Undertakings, Protection of Employment.
Right.
On paper, it's a law meant to protect employees when a business is sold. But in the hands of a hostile bureaucracy, it becomes a weapon of evasion. The NHS Trust forcibly transferred his employment contract, which they had already starved of a salary, remember, to a private contractor.
So they essentially outsourced the legal liability of ruining his life. They dumped his radioactive contract onto a third party so that when the lawsuits inevitably came, the NHS could just hold its hands up and say, hey, he doesn't work for us anymore. Talk to the contractor.
Exactly. It is a legal labyrinth designed specifically to exhaust his financial resources and strip him of his statutory rights.
It is the weaponization of paperwork.
Totally.
But surely, this is exactly why professional unions exist, right? The sources talk heavily about the British Medical Association, the BMA, and the General Medical Council, the GMC. Their entire mandate, the reason doctors pay them dues, is to shield practitioners from this exact kind of administrative tyranny and to protect patient safety. Where were they?
This is highlighted in the sources as the ultimate crushing betrayal. The BMA offered absolutely no meaningful legal shield. They completely capitulated to the NHS management, prioritizing administrative harmony over defending a doctor who was just fighting for infection control.
That's sickening.
And the GMC. Their betrayal was even worse. Instead of investigating the highly dangerous hospital conditions Srivatsa was desperately reporting, they turned around and pursued investigations against him.
You have got to be kidding me.
They utilized unverified, retaliatory complaints generated by the very hospital management he was whistleblowing on. The entire safety net became a trapdoor. They abandoned him entirely.
I have to pause here because we are looking at 14 years of relentless systemic destruction. If you take a human being and you systematically dismantle their career, their finances, their reputation, and their social standing, why didn't he just break?
Right. Any normal person would.
Exactly. Why didn't he just walk into the administrator's office, apologize, retract all his warnings about superbugs, get his name back on the registry, and open a quiet little private practice? How does the human mind survive that level of sustained obliteration?
To answer that, we really have to synthesize his rare, high IQ psychology with his spiritual lineage, looking through the lens of Carl Jung's concept of individuation, and specifically the terrifying necessity of ego death.
Ego death. Break down how that functioned in his reality.
So, for the first few decades of his life, Dr. Srivatsa's identity was deeply intertwined with being a highly respected, high-status NHS physician. He was the saintly doctor, the savior of children in the intensive care unit. He had the income, the title, the respect of society.
The whole package.
Right. That external identity is the ego or the persona. The bureaucratic retaliation systematically, brutally stripped every single piece of that external identity away.
They burned the house down to the studs. I mean, the sources describe him during this period living as a paying guest in a rented solitary room in Germany, completely bankrupted, estranged from his vibrant life, suffering from profound, debilitating PTSD.
But Jungian psychology argues that a human being cannot reach true psychological sovereignty, cannot realize their ultimate potential without suffering the total collapse of their previous socially constructed life.
You have to lose everything to find yourself.
Exactly. When every drop of external validation is violently removed, you are forced to discover what unbreakable core remains underneath all that rubble.
And what remained underneath the rubble of his NHS career was the ancient philosophy of his lineage, the concept of nishkama karma from the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, nishkama karma translates to taking obligatory action performed entirely without attachment to the fruits or outcomes of that action. As he sat in that rented room in Germany, stripped of his title and wealth, he fully realized his dharma.
His duty.
His cosmic duty was to sound the alarm on the superbug crisis and build a solution. He realized that the destruction of his career, his wealth, and his social standing was simply the necessary cosmic price for speaking the truth.
Wait, I see the psychological mechanism here. If his goal was to be a successful doctor, the hospital defeated him. But because his goal was to fill a sacred duty to protect humanity, the hospital's punishments were completely irrelevant. By accepting the destruction of his ego, he actually disarmed his attackers.
Precisely. Once you no longer rely on the system's validation to tell you who you are, the system loses all power over you. He became, in the truest psychological sense, uncancelable. They took every single worldly possession they could take, and he was still standing, still fiercely focused on his mission.
That is awe-inspiring. It profoundly reframes this 14-year nightmare. It wasn't just a punishment handed down by a corrupt administration, it was a crucible. The universe was forcibly burning away all the comfortable distractions of normal medical career so he could focus entirely on the monumental work required to save us.
Exactly.
Because, as the sources reveal, out of the ashes of his conventional career, he ended up building the exact tools designed to save the very system that exiled him.
So he's sitting in this isolated room. He has lost his hospital privileges. He cannot prescribe medicine. He cannot touch patients. But he still possesses the encyclopedic knowledge of a 30-year intensive care veteran, and he still possesses that high IQ pattern recognition.
Right.
If you cannot practice medicine inside the hospital, how do you get that life-saving triage knowledge to the masses before the superbug tsunami hits?
You have to digitize it. You have to extract the wisdom from the human doctor and build a system that bypasses the hospital bureaucracy entirely. Which brings us to the weapon of wisdom he forged in that fire. The Dr. Maya AI ecosystem and the Prima kiosks.
And this is where his rare visionary nature truly crystallizes.
The sources show he wasn't new to technology, right? He was actually pioneering digital health back in the 1990s. He created something called the PT, or Pediatric Assessment Tool, on those clunky old cyan PDAs, proving his foresight decades before big tech decided healthcare was profitable.
Way ahead of his time.
But the Dr. Maya AI is something fundamentally different than what Silicon Valley is building today.
It is a profound departure from modern medical AI. If you look at standard medical AI today, it's designed as a rigid, defensive, algorithmic symptom checker. It operates like a massive game of guess who.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. You input your symptoms, and it runs down a binary decision tree, eliminating possibilities until it spits out a terrifying list of potential diseases. And because it is programmed by corporate lawyers to avoid liability, it almost always ends with a giant warning saying, go to the emergency room.
Great. You type in like mild headache and stiff neck, and standard AI tells you that you might have spinal meningitis and you need to call an ambulance. It doesn't reduce fear, it mass produces panic.
Exactly. But Dr. Maya, which the sources describe as the soul of Srivatsa's new ecosystem, it abandoned those cold, rigid algorithms. Instead of a diagnostic calculator, it acts as a human-centered triage detective.
A triage detective.
Yeah, it is entirely based on a foundational thesis Dr. Srivatsa published in the British Medical Journal back in 1996. He wrote, quote, "The duty of a doctor is to listen to the story of a person."
Mechanically, though, How does an artificial intelligence listen to a story?
By analyzing context, not just data points, and by organizing the patient's narrative into a highly intuitive, non-threatening language, Dr. Maya utilizes what he calls the color-coded triad system.
Okay.
So instead of hitting a patient with complex medical jargon and a list of terrifying diseases, the AI assesses the symptoms, the environmental context, and the behavioral risk, and outputs a simple color.
I absolutely love this because it cuts right through the panic of the unknown. It's essentially a universal traffic light system for the human body.
Exactly like a traffic light.
Break down how the mechanics of these four colors actually dictate human behavior.
It is designed for maximum unpanicked clarity. If the AI analyzes your story and flags your symptoms as red, that indicates a serious, immediate danger. The behavioral action is clear. You need to seek urgent care or speak to a doctor immediately.
Okay, red is the classic emergency. The system is crashing, go get help.
Then there is blue. And mechanically, this is his most crucial, brilliant innovation regarding the antimicrobial resistance crisis.
What does blue mean?
Blue signals an infection risk, a contagious pathogen. The priority action for a blue code is not to rush to a crowded emergency room. The priority is to isolate. You isolate yourself to protect your family and your community, and then you seek remote guidance from a nurse or doctor.
Wait, I see the genius in that. If you have a highly contagious, resistant superbug, the absolute worst thing you can do is go sit in a hospital waiting room with 50 other immunocompromised people for 3 hours. The blue code prevents the biological bomb from walking into the building.
Yes.
That alone could stop a localized outbreak in its tracks.
Exactly. It breaks the chain of transmission before it reaches the vulnerable center. Next, you have green. This indicates a moderate concern. You aren't in immediate danger, you aren't highly contagious, but the body is struggling. You should consult a nurse or a doctor, especially if the symptoms persist over a few days.
And finally, yellow.
Yellow means a minor, self-limiting issue, a common cold, a mild stomach bug. The action here is self-care, rest, mindfulness, or maybe a quick chat with a local pharmacist. Your immune system has this under control. Do not panic.
So, mechanically, by deploying this color-coded traffic light to the public, you are immediately filtering out the 8 out of 10 people who are currently rushing to the clinic purely out of fear.
Yes.
You are telling the yellows and greens to stay home in bed. You are isolating the blues to stop transmission. And you are only sending the true reds to the overworked doctors. You are bringing profound order to a chaotic, collapsing system.
But Dr. Srivatsa, with his systems-level thinking, he recognized a fatal flaw in relying solely on digital software. An app on a smartphone is not enough to trigger a global health revolution.
Right, because if you only build an app, you are leaving behind billions of people who just don't have the hardware or the bandwidth.
This is where the physical architecture of his vision comes into play, the Prima kiosk. Prima stands for patient response and emergency medical access.
The sources dedicate a massive amount of space to Prima, detailing how these physical kiosks solve what they call the last mile problem in global health. Explain the mechanics of that.
The last mile refers to the hardest to reach, most vulnerable populations on Earth. Think about a mother in a remote rural village without a smartphone. Think about an elderly patient living alone in a city who lacks any technological literacy. Think about migrant workers or populations living in medical deserts with zero local doctors.
A cutting-edge smartphone app is completely invisible to them.
Exactly. But a physical, rugged Prima kiosk strategically placed in a local pharmacy, a village center, a transport hub, or a community hall that provides a tangible, physical doorway to this massive intelligence.
They can physically walk up to this machine, and the sources note it supports over 100 languages. So they can speak to it in their native dialect, tell it their story, and get that immediate color-coded guidance without needing to navigate an impossible bureaucracy.
Yes, but the true mechanical brilliance of the Prima network goes far deeper than individual triage. When you link thousands of these kiosks together, they form a national real-time epidemiological radar system.
Hold on, this is the part that completely blew my mind. Walk us through how a kiosk in a pharmacy becomes a public health early warning system.
Think about the data flow. Imagine a specific neighborhood or a rural village. If multiple people walk up to their local Prima kiosk on the same Tuesday, and they all describe symptoms that trigger a blue infection risk code, The AI ecosystem instantly recognizes a geographic cluster.
A hotspot.
Exactly. And while strictly maintaining patient privacy, the system immediately alerts local and national public health authorities that an outbreak is forming at these specific GPS coordinates.
It detects the pathogen before a single patient has even entered a hospital or died.
Exactly. It flips the entire paradigm of epidemiology from reactive, where we wait for the ICU to overflow and start counting the dead, to proactive. Authorities can dispatch targeted resources, issue local isolation warnings, and deploy specific medical supplies to that exact neighborhood before the pathogen spreads.
The projected impact of this system, as noted in the sources, is just staggering to read. They estimate that by widely deploying Dr. Maya and the Prima network, we could reduce unnecessary healthcare utilization by 60 to 80%.
And by filtering out that 80% of fear-driven traffic, you stop the endless, panicked flow of patients demanding unnecessary antibiotics.
Right.
By breaking that cycle, the epidemiological models suggest this system could potentially drop those projected antimicrobial resistance deaths from 16 million people a year down to 3.6 million.
He could literally save over 12 million human lives every single year, just by building a system that actually listens to the story and gives the fear a color.
It is the ultimate vindication of his life's work.
But as I was reading through the final sections of the source deck, I realized something profound. This entire massive technological ecosystem, the AI, the kiosks, the public health radar, it isn't just a logistical solution to save physical lives. It is actually driven by a fundamental philosophical shift in how human beings relate to their own biology.
It goes much deeper than triage.
Let's talk about Dr. Srivatsa's universal law of healing.
This brings us to the ultimate synthesis of his 50 years of observation. Dr. Srivatsa's deeper research moves beyond just organizing symptoms on a screen. He steps into what the sources describe as the cosmic operating system of the human body.
This is where he introduces the concept of zeta-9 signals. Now, I have to be completely honest here. When I first read the phrase zeta-9 microtremors, my brain instantly rejected it.
I get that.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie. It sounds like something a character on Star Trek scans for with a tricorder. How does this concept of quantum anticipation fit into hard, peer-reviewed, evidence-based medicine?
I completely understand the skepticism because the terminology sounds esoteric, but the mechanics behind it are rooted in incredibly advanced hypersensitive clinical biology. Srivatsa posits that the human body does not just suddenly break.
It doesn't just snap.
Right. It signals illness long before macroscopic physical symptoms like a fever, a rash, or a cough ever appear. The body communicates internal distress through subtle, measurable changes in its cellular and bioelectric fields. These pre-symptomatic shifts are what he categorizes as zeta-9 signals.
So mechanically, what is actually happening in the cells?
Long before a viral replication causes enough inflammation to trigger a cytokine cascade and give you a fever, your cells are losing homeostasis. There is a disruption in the bioresonance of the tissue.
Okay, I'm following.
Modern hypersensitive diagnostic tools are actually just beginning to validate this concept, catching molecular distress signals hours or days before the patient physically feels sick. The body is essentially whispering that a storm is coming.
I get it. It's like having a highly calibrated seismograph. You can pick up the deep subterranean rumbling of the tectonic plate shifting long before the actual earthquake shatters the surface.
That is a perfect mechanical metaphor. And if we connect this to the broader history of medicine, this exact philosophy aligns perfectly with Florence Nightingale's approach during the Victorian era.
Right. And she was operating without any antibiotics whatsoever.
Exactly. Nightingale was running filthy, dark military hospitals where soldiers were dying in droves from cross-infection. Her entire revolution was based on hypersensitive observation of the patient's environment. Nightingale fiercely believed that the nurse's job or the doctor's job is not actually to cure the patient.
Wait, if the doctor doesn't cure you, what are they doing?
Nightingale wrote that the vital force of nature does the curing. The body inherently knows how to heal. The medical professional's only job is to clear the obstacles. The dirt, the poor nutrition, the lack of fresh air, the psychological terror, so that the body's innate biological intelligence can take over and do its job.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right, and Dr. Srivatsa argues that modern box-ticking medicine, which just throws a harsh chemical pill at every minor symptom, actually blocks this innate healing potential. We suppress the symptom without clearing the obstacle.
We've become so incredibly reliant on the chemical intervention, the antibiotic, that we've completely forgotten how to create the biological environment for natural healing. And that ties directly into his concept of the faith index, which I found to be one of the most brilliant psychological reframings in the entire source stack.
The faith index is fascinating.
We all know about the placebo effect, but he looks at it completely differently.
Yeah, standard medical science views the placebo effect as an annoyance. It's seen as a statistical anomaly, a trick of the mind that ruins clinical trials, and something to be controlled for and dismissed. Oh, it's just in your head, it's not real medicine.
But Srivatsa says no. That is a measurable, potent biological force.
He argues for the mechanics of psychoneuroimmunology. If a patient and a healer truly believe and set a profound intention for health to occur, the biology itself literally alters. Intention rewrites the physical hardware of the body.
That's incredible.
When a patient feels heard, when their fear is reduced, their cortisol levels drop, their parasympathetic nervous system engages, and their immune response becomes exponentially more effective. He calls it the faith index, to validate this psychological state as a crucial primary metric of healing, rather than a mistake to be ignored.
Synthesizing all of this together, the AI, the kiosks, the Z9 signals, the faith index, the ultimate core message of Dr. Srivatsa and his collaborator Ashwini emerges.
Yeah.
And the sources point out that Ashwini was instrumental here, bringing the intuitive healing resonance to the rigid technical architecture of the Dr. Maya project.
A crucial partnership.
Their true ultimate goal isn't just to hand out slightly better prescriptions or build a fancier symptom checker. Their goal is the complete restoration of human free will.
Yes, to utterly break the cycle of dependency.
Because for over a century, we have been culturally conditioned to rely entirely on what the sources call the medical priests. We've been told that our bodies are incredibly dangerous, incomprehensible machines, and that only the guy in the white coat who speaks Latin is allowed to translate what is happening inside of us.
Which just breeds fear.
Right. Dr. Srivatsa wants to shatter that illusion permanently. He wants to empower ordinary, everyday people to be completely sovereign over their own health. He wants them to understand their own symptoms without terror and to reclaim their physical dignity.
And if we circle all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation, focusing on his rare, high IQ, visionary personality type, this entirely explains the phenomenon of why his ultimate success had to arrive so late in his life.
You literally cannot build a system this profoundly disruptive, this deeply wise, when you are a 25-year-old medical resident eager to please the establishment.
You cannot. The universe forged him on a very specific timeline. It required 30 years of intense, grueling clinical observation in the ICU to truly map the patterns of the antimicrobial resistance crisis.
The data gathering phase.
Exactly. Then it required the total, systemic, malicious destruction of his conventional career, his finances, and his ego to free him from the psychological need for institutional validation.
The ego death.
And finally, it required years of quiet spiritual rebuilding and synthesis in the Martavam healing forest in Auroville to figure out how to merge the ancient 600-year-old Vedic wisdom of his lineage with modern global AI architecture.
He transformed from a targeted, financially ruined whistleblower into a profound philosophical pioneer. He's wielding artificial intelligence, which most people view as a cold, terrifying, job-stealing algorithmic tool, and he's remaking it into a compassionate, color-coded bridge to help us reclaim our humanity. It is an incredible, almost unbelievable trajectory.
It really is. It is a testament to the endurance of a rare mind. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on everything we've unpacked today.
Tell you honest.
We have spent an entire century believing the comforting, heavily marketed lie that healing is something that is done to us by external experts. We willingly surrender our agency, our money, and our free will at the clinic door because we are afraid. But if the tools now exist, like the Dr. Maya ecosystem, to translate the subtle whispers of your own biology, to give you the simple color-coded language of your own risks, without the panic, what happens to the multi-billion-dollar fear industry, when you finally realize that the ultimate unshakable authority on your body has always been you.
That is a heavy, beautiful, and deeply empowering thought to end on. If you realize the institution's X-ray machine is broken, maybe it is finally time to learn how to read your own bones. Thank you for joining us on this massive deep dive into the 40-year journey of Dr. Srivatsa. It has been a profound exploration of medical prophecy, the terrifying stakes of the superbug tsunami, the incredible resilience of a rare human spirit, and the cosmic duty we all share in protecting one another. Until next time, keep questioning the systems and stay curious.